All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on behalf of the California Department of Education, Special Education Division, and the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project. We'd like to welcome you to the third in a series of 7 weekly webinars focused on secondary transition and presented by members of the California Transition Alliance leadership team. Today's presentation will address transition services that lead to post-secondary success. My name is Kevin Schaefer, Director of Program Support with the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of El Dorado County. Also with us is Kristen Brooks, Executive Director of the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project out of Riverside County. Next slide. The SIP project provides support to LEAs across California to increase inclusive opportunities and improve outcomes for students with disabilities. For more information on the project and to stay current on events throughout the state, you can visit our website at www.sipinclusion.org or join us on Facebook and Twitter at SIPinclusion. A Padlet has also been developed for future access to recordings, resources, and registration that we'll address in a moment. Next slide. We have included the registration link for you here, including a Spanish version for all upcoming webinars for sharing with staff and families. For your convenience, we've muted all participants, but please utilize the chat for questions and clarifications. Just be aware when using the chat that you are responding to all panelists and attendees. We'll do our best to address your questions. Just know that if we are unable to answer live, there will be a Q&A sheet created and posted on the Padlet for each webinar. Additionally, our team will be adding links to the chat box as we understand they are difficult to copy from the slides. Next slide. For this presentation and for those scheduled over the next 4 weeks, we've created a Padlet of resources for you to access. Simply click on the resource you're interested in and download as directed. The first column contains overarching resources, while each subsequent column contains resources specific to each webinar topic. To access the Padlet, which will continue to be updated, you simply need the web address and feel free to share it with colleagues. Be sure to join us next Wednesday, May 13th, for information focused on course of study and the development of annual goals. Next slide. Before we begin, we have a couple polling questions we'd like you to answer. For the first, we'd like to know who's here today. So if you click what your current role is, either a student, parent or family, educator, agency representative, post-secondary education or training, or if it's not listed above, please enter in the chat. We'll give it another 30 seconds. All right, let's see who's here. For the most part, 72% are educators. Also glad to see that we have parent and family members, 1% students, and both 10% agency representatives and other. Thank you for entering into the chat. Next slide. We'd now like you to rate your knowledge of transition as defined in IDEA. Let's bring up the poll. How would you rate your knowledge of transition as defined in IDEA? I'm new to this. I know some, just need to put the pieces together. I'm in the trenches and want to hone my knowledge. I'm an expert, or I want to explore early education activities ages 0 to 16 aligned with secondary transition outcomes. We'll give it another few seconds. All right, I'm in the trenches and want to hone my skills. Excellent, 63%. We also have at 25%, I know some, just need to put the pieces together. Awesome, then you're in the right place. The California Transition Alliance leadership team has put together amazing content over the last 2 webinars, and this one will be no different. Next slide. We are grateful for this unique collaborative opportunity with Sue Sawyer and her team of experts. Please remember to take care of yourselves and those you love. I will hand it over to Sue, who will introduce her team presenting transition services that lead to post-secondary success. Thank you all for being here with us. Sue?
Thank you, Kevin. The California Transition Alliance has a mission to provide support and resources to youth and youth-serving professionals who support youth as they transition from high school to adulthood. You can visit us at our website, catransitionalliance.org. Next slide, please. We accomplish this mission through a variety of strategies. One is we create resources and tools, we provide workshops, we host statewide meetings, we collaborate with state and national partners, we lead work groups. I lead the high school diploma work group and Richard Rosenberg leads the Social Security work group. And we play a leadership role on the California Community of Practice on secondary transition. I am the first to admit that we have a very bad business model because when you go to our website, you have free access to everything we create. I want to direct your attention to the cover of the book, Secondary Transition Planning, The Basics. And I want to talk for just a minute about why that book has the cover that it has. It's first of all a young child looking down a path towards their future. In reality, we think that if you wait until 16 to start transition planning for youth, you're starting about 15 years too late. We want to start early and we want to be a building block towards developing transition. The second thing is there are 3 words on the slide, and one of them is the word hope. Hope means that students need to have a sense of optimism about their future. They need to see possibilities that are out there for them. Confidence means they need trust in themselves. They need to have the confidence to be able to plan their career and the confidence that they have the skills and the talents needed for success. And the third thing is trust. Trust is trust in resources. Sometimes those resources are adult allies. Sometimes they are financial aid, transportation, and sometimes they're food, clothing, and shelter. Without these 3 characteristics, any child would struggle to answer the question, what do you want to do after you leave high school? If you don't have a sense of hope about your future, why would you create a plan? If you don't have confidence in yourself, why would you create a plan? Why would you try to take the risk of beginning to believe in yourself? And if you don't have trust in resources, even though you have hope and confidence, it seems hopeless. Why would you create a plan? So that's the message of the cover on the Basics booklet. Next slide. We are pleased today to present this training on transition services. Transition services are defined as a coordinated set of activities for a child with disabilities. IEPs are required to list transition services that will be provided to help youth achieve their post-secondary goals. The rule of thumb is 1 transition service minimally should be listed for each goal. As you look at the chart in front of you, you notice that we have IDEA defined traditional services that had been in CASEMIS and our CalPADS. And then we have the pre-employment transition services. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act defined those services as job counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary opportunities, workplace readiness, training on self-advocacy, and they assign a dual responsibility to enroll students in dual enrollment. The third set of potential services is related to the college and career readiness indicators. And we have a wonderful panel of presenters who will present on each of these topics today. Next slide. Linda O'Neill is our first speaker, and she is from San Diego State University Interwork Institute. She has worked with California Career Innovations and WinTAC. She is also affiliated with Chapman University, Thompson Policy Institute, and the Regional Center of Orange County. It is with great pleasure that I turn it over to Linda. Thank you, Linda.
Hi, Sue. Thanks so much. Happy to be a part of this team, and welcome to everyone who's on the webinar today. Next slide. What I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit of the groundwork and the legislation that gives us the impetus to go ahead and provide pre-employment transition services with such enthusiasm and excitement. So I'll talk a little bit about OSERS, that's the Office of Special Ed and Rehabilitative Services. And the great thing about that particular organization is that it brings together both the Office of Special Ed Programs and the Rehabilitation Services Administration, which is awesome because we have the IDEA and Rehabilitation Act coming together to support all of us as we go about promoting pre-employment transition services. Next slide, please. The Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act was passed in 2014, and really the idea behind it, and the U.S. Department of Labor oversees implementation, was to improve our country's public workforce development system and to include and make sure that we're addressing the needs of those individuals who have significant barriers to employment. And of course, that includes people with disabilities. The idea for this piece of legislation is to make sure people have an opportunity to access high quality jobs, hopefully that there'll be careers, and then also to help our employers so that they can hire and keep skilled workers in their workforce. You'll see in some of the slides that I'm doing some websites that you can go to for more information. Next slide, please. One of the items that I have on the Padlet is called a transition guide. And I wanted to thank Christina Lewis for putting together this Padlet for us. Great opportunity for people that are listening to the webinar to download some of the items. I think I have 5 that are included with my slides. So thank you, Christina. This particular document is called a transition guide. It's put out by the U.S. Department of Education. And it really looks at post-secondary education and employment for students with disabilities. It talks about programming, it talks about transition services and the requirements for that are identified in IDEA and the Rehab Act. It also talks about options for after you leave secondary school and encourages individuals to go on to post-secondary education and training. And then it also talks about planning. It includes information about person-centered planning and self-advocacy. So really a great booklet. It has 55 pages in it, so I would encourage you to take a look at it. Next slide, please. All right, so we have both the U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Education really involved in implementation of WIOA and the pre-employment transition services. I have another document that's on the Padlet. It's called Collaboration Opportunities. And what's nice to see at the federal level is they're encouraging such collaboration between all these partners. And I know for me, it really has encouraged me to promote collaboration at the local level. And it's nice to see that these big departments have our back and they want us to go ahead and work with each other to provide the best services that we can. Next slide, please. All right, so the rehabilitation of 1973 was amended by the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, WIOA, in 2014. And you'll see some of the things that it has done for all of us who are trying to work with students with disabilities to make sure they get into great careers. So it really expanded pre-employment transition services, and some people call them pre-ETs. In California, we call them student services. And in the legislation, you'll see reference to VR agencies. Basically, in California, we like to do things our own way, and we call it Department of Rehabilitation, or DOR. So everybody else in the country calls it VR. So that's why you'll see that terminology. Anyways, the idea is for us to work together to provide these pre-ETs. They want us to start early, doing job exploration, assisting students identify what their careers are, looking at what possible vocational rehab services might help our students, what transition services do they need. Pre-ETs can start once a student requests it, or it's recommended for one of the pre-employment transition services. So it can go either way. And they must be provided or arranged in collaboration with local education agencies. Next slide. These services are intended to provide students with disabilities the opportunity to get ready for work. We want our students going to competitive integrated work settings, and that's a really big deal, especially for our students who have significant disabilities. We need to make sure that they have those opportunities, just like all the other students. We also are to be exploring post-secondary training options, and that's for all students. We would hope that some of our students would get into recognized credential programs so that they can have meaningful post-secondary employment, and that is employment that will help them have a meaningful life, a life that they can take care of themselves if possible. There's an increased emphasis on transition to employment in the Rehab Act, so it aligns with IDEA, and it ensures that students with disabilities are provided work experiences before they leave high school. And I know in some of the grant projects that I've been fortunate enough to work on, that's a really big deal. We want our students, all of them, to be able to have work experiences, and we all need to work together to do that. And this piece of legislation helps us to do that. Next slide, please. So why student services? And some of the information that I have in this PowerPoint came from Jessica Popjovlo, Department of Rehab, and we thank her. She's been a really great partner to us as we've done some of our employment preparation grants. Anyways, why student services? Students, what we know, students with disabilities are not going to work at the same rate as our other students are. How come they're not getting jobs? That's what we need to figure out. That's what the student service is intended to take a look at. Congress wants VR agencies, DOR in California, to work with schools to assist and empower students with disabilities to get ready for a great future. California has lots of students in secondary and post-secondary ed who need this kind of support. Next slide. The Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center, I wanted to bring that up. It's a great website for you all to take a look at. What I like about this particular group is they're in charge of supporting all the vocational rehabilitation offices throughout the country. They have a lot of great people that are intended to help all of us to implement programming across the country. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. But first, this is a definition that came off their website, and there is a very specific population of students that PREETS is focused on. Basically in California, and all the states are not the same, so I'll just talk California. The youngest student that we're typically focused pre-employment skills training on is 14, and the oldest is 21, unless they're continuing to be in like an adult transition program or something where they're 22 and they still need the support. Anyways, the students have to be eligible for special ed, or they have to be eligible for a 504 plan and actually have a 504 plan. Next slide. All right, so there's two types of programming provided by our Department of Rehabilitation. One is the potentially eligible students, and this is what's has brought on new from PREETS is the PE students, no requirement to determine eligibility. They don't have to have an individual plan for employment, or you might call it IPE, and they don't need to have assessments. VR also serves students through the traditional Department of Rehab model that most of you may be familiar with. And this is where the students get a lot of very specific services, and they also have an individual plan for employment. So two different types of student populations. Next slide, please. All right, these are the required activities. And I know Sue talked about them a little bit already. This is a graphic that I thought would make it easy for some of you to see. Let's go to the next slide, and I like to see my things laid out straight. So the first one is the job exploration counseling. The second one is work-based learning. The third one is counseling on opportunities for enrollment, not only in post-secondary training like we would traditionally think, but also in comprehensive transition programs. The fourth is work readiness training to develop social skills and independent living. And then the last one, and this is my favorite, instruction in self-advocacy, helping our students learn how to really access the kinds of programming that they need to speak up for themselves. And some of this can be done through person-centered planning. And I know on our last webinar, person-centered planning was talked about. So those are the 5 required activities. These are also listed in the basics book that Sue talked about on page 20. Next slide. All right, so in addition to these 5 required activities, there are coordinating activities that need to happen. One is attending, this is for the DOR staff to attend IEP meetings when invited. So for those of you educators out there, it's really a great idea to contact your local DOR office if you're not already partnering with them and see if you can get some staff to come in and help you at your IEP meeting. Number 2 is to work with local workforce development centers, whether it's the One Stop Center or your Workforce Development Board. And I can tell you that there's a lot of great opportunities when working with your local One Stop Center. A lot of youth programming where if you guys partner, you can really improve and expand the options that you have. The third one is working with schools to coordinate it and ensure the provision of pre-employment transition services. And that's where I think it's a great opportunity. I've been fortunate to partner with Department of Rehabilitation for probably 20 years. And I can tell you that's one of the best things I've ever done as an educator, to start to expand my opportunities with outside organizations and definitely with Department of Rehabilitation. So if you're not currently working with them, I would recommend it highly. And we're going to have a speaker from Department of Rehab today to talk a little bit about it. The fourth one is to attend person-centered planning meetings for students who are receiving supplemental security income. So I think that's a really good opportunity too. And then last of all, making sure that students are connected who are receiving Medi-Cal in California to make sure they have funding for medical and other health-related services. Next slide, please. How are the student services delivered? Student services are delivered through the DOR staff themselves. They may have students come into the office. Now they're doing it virtually, which is a great opportunity. They are delivered through the Transition Partnership Project school staff. They also have providers who they pay for to provide these services, and they're great partners of theirs, not school districts necessarily. Okay, and then the last one is school districts that don't necessarily have TPP and they have a weekend work program or a summer transition employment program. And so there's a few of those in California, and if you are in a neighborhood where the STEPS program is going on in the summer, I'm not sure about this summer, but it's a great opportunity. Lots of good things going on by Department of Rehab. Next slide. This is a flyer that I wanted you to see. It's also in the Padlet. We got this from our Department of Rehabilitation staff in Sacramento, and really great, kind of an encouraging flyer that you can give to students to get them interested in Department of Rehab. Next slide. You can also go to the website at the Department of Rehabilitation. There's a whole site that's called Get Ready to Work. Lots of great resources there that you can take advantage of. One of the pieces that I really like most is the success story section. And it has clients from the Department of Rehab sharing their great stories. So take a look at those. You'll be impressed. Next slide. All right, this is a picture of the WinTAC site, the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center. And you can see in the middle, it has the pre-employment transition services. If you get an opportunity, go into that site, click on that, and it will take you to a lot of really great ideas. What I like about what they're doing with the WinTAC website is they're having people from all over the country from the VR offices send in resources and ideas for curriculum and the things that are working for them as they go about providing pre-employment transition services. And I found some really great ideas there. Next slide. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about WinTAC, and they've got some great partners. This particular grant is led by San Diego State University, the Interwork Institute. And these people from the National Disability Institute is involved, the Lead Center, George Washington University, the University of Arkansas, Policy Works, Career Index, the Council of State Administrators for VR, and then Syracuse University. Great people who spend quite a bit of time trying to make sure that resources are put on this website, and they go out and they do a lot of technical assistance. Next slide. All right, I also want to talk about NTAC, the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. Get on that website. Sign up for some of their webinars. They are some of the best webinars I've ever attended. Of course, second to the ones that we're doing here, but there's some great people that get on there and do some training, and I think you'll find it valuable. I put I think one of the resources on the Padlet that I put on is from the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. The particular webinar sheet that you see on the slide is one that they did on April 7th, and it's archived for anybody who wants to go in and see it, but it's all about virtual work-based learning experiences, employment preparation. So get on there. I know that some of us have, our group went on there and listened to it, and it's really awesome. Next slide. All right, another Padlet resource is a Q&A. It has a listing of, I think there's 17 pages here, of their instructional resources for transition-focused education. So get in there, take a look at that. You'll find that valuable. Next slide. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there's lots and lots of tools and strategies that are being used to provide pre-employment transition services virtually, now that we're all stuck in our houses and trying to figure out what to do with students. But these are some of the things that I have heard about, seen, and people are really enthusiastic about it. So if you get an opportunity, take a look at some of these things. I also included on the Padlet a sheet that was put out by the Washington State Workforce Services in Rehabilitation. And they have some of these activities on their suggestion sheet. So get out there, connect with some of these people. Collaboration is definitely the key, and your rehab person, rehabilitation staff can help you with some of this. All right, next slide. I want to introduce some really great people who are going to talk more about how you implement things at the local level. Joyce Montgomery is the transition program supervisor, and I have had the great opportunity to work with Joyce for over 17 years doing different federal grants, and she's awesome. I think you'll learn a lot from her. I know I do. And also Elizabeth Musgrove, who's the team manager from the Inland Empire Student Services Division of Department of Rehabilitation. And Elizabeth was with Joyce and I when we worked on our California Promise project. So welcome both of you guys, and thank you much for being here.
Thank you, Linda. And so my portion of this presentation today is talking about DOR student services, as Linda described, the pre-employment transition services, and how those are being implemented at by a local school district, our program, and then Elizabeth is going to share about Department of Rehabilitation local office. So for us in Vallejo City Unified School District, we entered into a pilot design a couple years ago for our DOR student services. With collaboration with our Department of Rehabilitation Cooperative Program Section, the Department of Education Transition Team, and San Diego State University for our lessons learned from Cal Promise. So really the idea for us is we wanted to take the things that we knew that worked so well in Cal Promise, and that we wanted to be able to provide those to our students and continue to do that in our pilot design. And our logo, employability, is our umbrella name for that. And for us, this was, we sent out to a contest to our students, and one of our 18 to 22 program students actually designed our logo for us for our umbrella. Next slide. So employability as our umbrella, underneath this, the idea is to have seamless transition programs. We have many different transition programs that we administer through our district. And this is by taking all those different programs, and instead of looking at them from a siloed perspective, looking at them from a what are services that are provided and how can those services collaborate together to provide services for our students. So by creating a menu of services. Our program design is a student's needs-based design. I'll share that with you. And I'll share with you about our person-driven planning process and how this is leading to career action plans and how the instruction is, it comes from that. Family engagement is a key piece of this, as it was with CalPromise, particularly for our students who have more needs, more support needs. For example, when we're in our planning processes, sometimes our families are our voices for our students. And then we have our evaluation process that I'll share with you and how we're tracking those services. Next slide. So here are the programs that are under our umbrella of employability. So we start off with in our middle school programming, moving through high school and beyond. And we have a project search program with our Kaiser Hospital. That's also kind of one of our capstone courses, particularly for our students with more significant disabilities. Next slide. So here's the menu of services that's created from looking at all these different transition programs. And the focus of this presentation, we're really going to be talking about the menu of services, the DOR student services that Linda O'Neill described to you, and how those services are being implemented by our district. But then in addition, we do have these other services that are available that's working along around that as well. Next slide. So here is a graphic that shows how our needs-based multi-tiered system of support for transition is organized. So this pyramid idea is very much the same, is that the majority of our students are being able to access our services from the bottom tier. So the majority of our students that come in our transition programs are able to participate in our seminar courses, in our workshops. They're able to we provide instruction in person and online, and now, of course, in this time, we're 100% doing our online and distance instruction. And all of our students, including our students in the A to G, are able to access our services this way. And then as we move up the pyramid into our smaller groups, we have more individualized case management. This is more for our students with more extensive support needs, which is what we used to call moderate severe disability students. And so we're looking at doing, you know, for those students, it's a smaller size groups. And then at the top of our pyramid, we're really looking at our students who have more intensive intervention needs, our students who are receiving SSI, our students that are in the foster care system, juvenile justice, or homeless. So we're really looking at what are the services that our students need at that top of the pyramid as being our most at-risk students. Next slide. So here is a graphic that shows how the engagement flows by age. And so, you know, we're starting off with a one-page enrollment, which is another hallmark of our pilot, that when we're enrolling our students, we're not continually enrolling them. And then as they move into age groups, they have access to services. So as we talk about at 16, our students have access to the DOR student services. And at that point is where we're enrolling them with our Department of Rehabilitation. And in addition to that, our students who perhaps maybe they don't want to enroll with us, but we still can work with our local DOR office to enroll students to potentially eligible. And I would recommend anyone who doesn't have a TPP or workability to reach out to their DOR local offices. They have some amazing services that they can provide to students. Next slide. So specifically for our transition partnership program, for our DOR student services for both PE, the potentially eligible, and the VR, vocationally rehabilitation students that are still in school, we do go through an additional enrollment process where that they do become clients with Department of Rehabilitation. And we have a student-centered plan. I'm going to share more with you about that. And we share that with our counselor, create our career action plan, and then they have their specialized instruction. Next slide. So here's a graphic of what that looks like. So we're doing this student-driven plan, which is leading to a career action plan. I'm going to show you how we're focusing in on, what our students' needs are, and then how we provide those services. We're doing quarterly progress reporting, and then going back again to looking at it from, are we meeting what the students' needs? Are they making progress? Next slide. So in our enrollment process, this is also an opportunity that we are starting to do our data collection for our college and career readiness and progress reporting. We're using E2E databases. It's developed by our Solano County Office of Education, and it's a way for us to be able to get the reporting out for, of that for what our students are receiving. Next slide. So here's our student-driven plan, and that this is based on the Orange County model that came out of Cal Promise. And starting off with the idea, person-centered planning, as Richard was describing, is what is the students, what are their goals, what are their dreams, what are their hopes for the future, and then how our program can assist them. And our students with more significant disabilities, they may need to have their families be part of that. So as Richard described, depending upon who is in that, the person-driven planning meeting is really going to be determined by what the students need. So we may need their family, we may need their teachers, we may need other support providers. And for us, we're really honing in on what the post-secondary goals for our students. So what are their dreams as they prepare for education after high school? What are their dreams as they prepare for employment after high school? And where do they expect to be living after high school? So those are the three main categories, as most of us know in transition, that we're looking for post-secondary goals. So how can we help our students meet those things? And as we start this process when the students are younger, we're continuing to work with them on what that means. And by the time they're 16, this is information that we're sharing with their case manager teacher, we're sharing with their DOR counselor, so that we can make sure all of our plans, our transition planning and Department of Rehabilitation planning, we're all on the same page. And in the second section, this is where we're really looking to determine the support needs for the students. What are the things that the students, barriers they may have? They may not tell us those things right off, and it may take a little bit of time for us to find out. So that's why we start the process young, and we continue to work with the students. By the time they're 16, we're really looking to help them start developing their career goals. Next slide. So as part of that, taking that student-driven plan and turning that into a career action plan, and that career action plan, we're looking at the student's career pathway, and we're focusing it around on what is the student's most immediate need. Do they want to have work experience for employment? Do they want to start thinking about after high school for education? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go to an internship? Do they want to go to the California Conservation Corps? So really helping the students develop that pathway. And self-advocacy we do as a separate pathway, kind of add-on for all of our planning, because we know that that's something extremely important for our students to be able to advocate for themselves. Next slide. So here is a cover page for what our work experience pathway looks like. And it shares what is the career pathway goal. Some of our students, at 16, they may not quite have that goal defined clearly, but we're working, we're starting off maybe more general, and then as we move through the years, developing that to be a more clear goal. And we're doing that through providing these DOR student services specifically tailored to each student. So the activities that you'll see listed on this cover page will be the activities that the student needs to achieve their career pathway goal. And we're focusing here, you can see, is the job exploration counseling, the workplace readiness, leading to the work-based learning. We know if the students are going to be out in the community working, that they need to have that workplace readiness taken care of first. Next slide. And so, which leads us to our employability rubric. And this is a tool that we use to help us to measure when the student is ready for that experience. So next slide, and I'll show you what that looks like. And here is our employability rubric. So this rubric is designed using 21st century collaborative work skills necessary, the 4 C's. They talk about communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and the Common Core anchor standards that the students need. So with those in mind, this rubric was designed to be able to measure where our students are doing in these areas. And so this rubric is the student themselves rate themselves on how they think they're doing. Their parents rate them. Our case manager teachers rate them, as well as our career specialists. So we're really looking for our students to be achieving that 3, that employability star down the line. that they're maintaining good attendance, that they're maintaining a good GPA, that they're able to demonstrate their work readiness skills. And a student may rate as a 1 or a 2 in a particular area, but that may mean that's going to be an area that we're going to need to focus on to help them get to that next level. And or it may be that they are an employability star with accommodations provided, say, for the safety awareness. So we're making sure that they have a job coach with them out on the job site, that they're not alone. So again, this is just a tool that we use to help us to guide us along for our students ready to have work experience. Next slide. So here's a cover sheet for our post-secondary education and college pathway. Lots of times our students will say, you know, I'm really not ready to work right now. I really just want to focus on going to school. And so we'll go ahead and start working on them developing a plan for college or for adult school or whatever their training program may want to be. And we do, again, start off with job exploration counseling because eventually they are going to need to work. So it won't be just about going to school, going to training. It's about you're going there for what, or what are you going to achieve? And then adding that counseling on post-secondary education piece through our activities to support. And I'm going to share some of those with you. And then, of course, self-advocacy is a critical piece of this, as we know that after our students leave the K-12 system, that they're going to need to self-advocate if they're to be able to get the accommodations that they might need in their education programs. Next slide. And so for our career pathways, we're really also in our school, Vallejo Unified School District, we have career academy pathways that our students can participate in. And so those are listed here on this slide. And so our career transition specialists are working alongside our case manager teachers as we're developing our students' career pathways, that they're in the pathway, they're in their academy, that they're getting those experiences, those work experiences or exploration activities are related to their career academy. And many of our career academies are connected to additional education programs and employers. And so students are having those opportunities to do experience outside of the school as well through their academy. And we additionally have an 18 to 22 adult transition program for our students that may be continuing in that direction and work-based learning. And we have our Project Search Kaiser Hospital. Next slide. And just briefly to show you our self-advocacy career pathway, just again, that's just so critical. The next slide, I'll show you one of our lesson plans for self-advocacy. And so this was a workshop that we were doing in person, but we have now transitioned it to the online Google Classroom. And you can see it's, we have taken the basic ideas of the self-advocacy, and then we have added the activities that the students can do in their Google Classroom to help prepare them. Next slide. So a little bit more on our service delivery implementation. So we are meeting the DOR student services in different ways. We have our specialized TPP class. We have individualized case management. We have our workshops that we're doing. Our students are involved in their pathways. We have the parent and family information events that we're doing, along with having them participate as part of our evaluation process for our students, doing employability rubrics and person-driven planning. We also have a really strong employment engagement. We have around 40 employers in Vallejo that are committed and part of our advisory for our employment, and they provide opportunities for our students to get paid work experience during individualized as well as during like spring break. And as we were not able to do that this spring break, we're actually working with our employers to come up with a virtual experience of a summer camp this summer in June. Next slide. So here's a sample of what our Succeeding in the World of Work, this is the curriculum I was telling you about we use for our TPP seminar courses. And this Succeeding in the World of Work is an online curriculum we were already using. And so now it was very easy to transition that to online to be able to provide students those lessons. And you can see how each of the chapters in the book is related to a DOR student service to be able to prepare our students so that they're ready to have the skills that they need. Next slide. So our workshops, they're a hallmark of our program. We were doing those in person. We have now transitioned them into Google Classrooms, and I'll share a little bit about that. But we're basically using resources that are available to all of us, such as the California Career Zone, Explore Work, the California Career Resource Network lesson plans. John Maris Coots and his team at CDE has done an amazing job there with basically taking those lessons and turning them into Google Classrooms. And I'll share you some samples of what that looks like. We're also using Conover Workplace Readiness Certification, and our students that go through that program have, and it's an online resource, so they can be assigned that remotely. And the students go through different lessons, and they have to take a test at the end, and they have to pass with an 80% or more to show that they have achieved workplace readiness. And this is something that we use when we're having our students go out to their employment camps, that they have their workplace readiness certification. And we're also working with our Chamber of Commerce on this, so that we're showing how that we are preparing our workforce in Vallejo. A couple other resources I've mentioned there as well are ones that we use in our workshops. Next slide. And this is the explorework.com. I just want to show you a snapshot of this because I haven't seen a lot of folks have mentioned this one, but it's amazing if you haven't used it. It's a free service that was developed by one of the universities in response to the DOR Student Services, Pre-Employment Transition Services. And you'll see that each of these workshops are directly related to one of the DOR Student Services. The videos are engaging, the students enjoy them. We really get a lot of engagement from our students in these workshops. Next slide. So here's a snapshot of what one of our Google Classrooms look like. I just want to kind of put that out there to show you, hopefully to inspire you, that you could create something, because I'm not a Google queen. I'm kind of new to this, so I'm sure some of you probably can do a much better job as well. But in our Google Classrooms, we have now included our renewal applications for our students, our applications for our students to participate in our project search, our vocational rehabilitation piece of our program, as well as each of the individual workshops that we were doing in person. We have put those into an online format, so based on the 5 DOR student services. And in the next slide, I'll show you a couple examples of those classes or lessons. So here's on one side of the screen, we have the Explore Work for Job Exploration, and it shows all of the different links that the students will receive. So when they receive this lesson, it'll have them to go through these links, watch these videos, and do these activities. On the other side, we have ones that are related to matchmaking interests and careers, and this is using the California Career Resource Center, the lesson plans, and the students will receive their lesson plan for this topic directly to their inbox, and they can do these activities, watch these videos, and respond. Next slide. And here's a couple more on post-secondary education counseling. On one side, we have developing my education goal. And again, these are ones done through Explore Work. And they can go in and watch these videos and do these activities. On the other side, we have the college plan well and pay less. We all like that. And it has the lessons that are directly related to that from the California Career Resource Network. Right.
Joyce, a quick question. Can our participants access the videos from the explorework.com link?
Yes. If they go to explorework.com, it's explore-work.com.
Thank you.
And so then the final piece that I will share with you is about our evaluation process. We do have the progress reports and monitoring we do with our counselors. We are monitoring our college and career indicators that we share with our office, as well as our outcome data for our students. Next slide. And so for our college and career indicators, they have a new name and definition, if you haven't heard that yet. So the new name and definition for 2019-2020, the 14.48 is transition classroom-based work exploration. Students have to have 100 hours of this activity from entering 9th grade to consider themselves to be complete. And this is one for the college and career indicators. I've referenced here page 7 from the basics, and it tells you a little bit more transition, the basics, and that provides you more information on what the California and career indicators are all about. And this is one of the ways that we're being able to determine if our students are having an opportunity to become college and career ready. So this is a measure that we're using. And so how we're tracking that in our district is, again, as we mentioned, when we're enrolling students, we're starting that tracking process. We're tracking the hours our students are attending their TPP seminar classes, the hours they're receiving their college and career readinesses on Fridays and curriculum support, the hours that they're participating in their workshops. And we're also doing a once-a-month workshop that we do with our students, where all of our students from all of our district comes together to do that. And so that's how we're tracking that for the 14.48. And then on the next slide, it shows how we're tracking that for the 14.47, which is the transition work-based experiences. So the first one being the classroom experiences, and this one being the work-based. So for the work-based, we have, again, it's 100 hours since entering 9th grade, so it's cumulative. And we're tracking that by the hours that the student participates in work-based learning. Their paid TPP paid work experiences is something that we do, which is individualized in our employment camps. And we're also tracking their hours that they participate in other work-based learning activities. And again, these are activities that now we're looking at doing virtually. Next slide. All right, so here is just a little bit on our program outcomes, 18-19, just kind of give you an idea. And again, these are, we're looking at these as, as baseline, as moving forward, as we're working on our pilot design and continuing to improve the way that we're providing services. We really felt good about having 52% of our youth continuing to be employed a year after graduation, and 30% of our youth are continuing in post-secondary education. For program completers, we had 36% of our students that ended up meeting that completer for the 100 hours for the 14.47 and 14.48. And again, those students who did complete or didn't complete, many of them are still enrolled in our school, because we're looking at this from 9th through 12th. So we'll continue to look at that data to see how it makes more sense to be able to capture that, but we are tracking it. And then lastly, we had 100% of our students that were enrolled that received at least one student-driven plan. And we think that is making all the difference. And again, being able to find ways to continue to engage with our students through this time while we're having to do distance learning. Our career transition specialists have been amazing with the work that they've been doing with outreaching to our students. And our teachers have been amazing as well. And we have, we feel really good about how continuing on with that to be able to continue to provide our DOR student services to our students, because we can't leave our students behind in this time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Musgrove from Department of Rehabilitation to share about how they continue to provide services in their Inland Empire student unit.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Joyce, and thank you for having me and inviting me to participate in this webinar. Very exciting. I want to first say it's Teacher Appreciation Week. So, and I see there's a lot of educators on the webinar. So I want to say thank you so much. You're doing amazing, amazing work. And I just want to thank you, all of you. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is how our student services team has evolved. So next slide, please. Thank you. So let's start with the Cal Promise, and just a few points regarding the mobility family unit and the work experience. So Cal Promise was a 5-year grant, and it was working with 14 and 16-year-olds with their families and providing services and resources in order to improve education and employment outcomes, whereby reducing Social Security needs. And so the 3 areas The first one being mobility. So we had the ability to meet with the whole family, sometimes outside of school or Department of Rehabilitation offices, such as Starbucks or community sites. And then the family unit, assisting families in identifying and reducing barriers, sort of a village concept. So not just the school, not just parents, not just Inland Regional Center, but all of our partners in working towards successful outcomes or with the students. And then work experiences allowed us to have a partnership with the school staff, identifying their needs and providing those services to the students. So with that, we took that information and expanded the vision of working with students. So next slide, please. So we still have our counselors and our TPP counselors, and we're still working with the 5 services that Linda and Joyce have explained. But we also have what we came to as one unit in the Inland Empire. So we have a student services unit that I am involved in the manager of. And it focuses on being innovative and flexible on providing student services to our students. And it involves the San Bernardino counties and the Riverside counties, counselors going out to the different areas. So we also have the mobility, the ability to be mobile. So the focusing to partner with schools and our community organizations, not just the schools, so outside of our communities, like the Boys and Girls Clubs and the YMCAs and all those great organizations that have students there. We have the ability to meet at the schools, the libraries, community sites to provide those services. And then a little bit about our mobile unit. We have 2 new positions, and the titles are Community Resources Navigators. And those positions are responsible for researching and providing resources for students and their families. And we're talking about viable resources, not necessarily and not at all, here's a number, go give them a call. So we're looking for, here's a number, this is your contact, this is your eligibility needs, this is what you need to do to get those services moving, whether it be, and these are possibly for at risk, maybe homelessness, shelter needs, domestic violence. You know, so we're trying to expand and provide and reduce barriers for students and families. And then we also have one more counselor, and she will be focusing on students who have short-term vocational goals. So normally, like we were talking about with the PE, the potentially eligible and student services, and then we have the bigger VR. So we don't want students to be lost, or we don't want them to have to wait. So we're trying to think of ways to sort of streamline as quickly as possible. So we have a counselor who we're working on with students who have short-term vocational goals, like somebody who wants to be a welder, an electrician, or maybe a CNA. So we're working with those students as they transition out of high school into those type of vocational trainings. So next slide, please. So thankfully, the Department of Rehabilitation is still open. We're still ready for business, still ready to partner with organizations, with students, with families. And so we move very quickly in establishing virtual services in light of COVID-19. And some of the services that we're moving forward is the Inland Empire has devised a virtual team. And these are counselors, service coordinators, managers on how we can move forward so that there's no delay or as limited delay as possible. We're working on online orientation for not only PE, but VR in general. So online orientation, online or virtual intakes. And we're also, yay, electronic signatures on most of our forms, not all of our forms, but most of our forms, our applications, our PE student services application, those are all going to be electronic. Again, just to try to limit the delay and the services for the students. So with that, we're also working with virtual workshops, live workshops, recorded workshops, over the phone workshops. So that's what we're doing at this point and providing those services. We are in contact with the students. We're in contact with the teachers and the staff at the schools, as well as outside organizations. Like I said, there's organizations that have students and maybe they're there for after school programs like the Boys and Girls Club, or like I said, the YMCA, or the community partnership programs that we have. So we are actively outreaching to let them know that the Department of Rehabilitation is still here. And I did put the importance of emails and telephone numbers. I don't think we really had the importance or the understanding before COVID-19 because we would just go to the schools, or we would just contact the teacher, and the teacher or whoever was helping us would be able to direct us in that way. But these emails are so important, as I'm sure everybody is coming across, the right telephone numbers. So that's what we're really working towards, to update so that we can move forward in providing those services and letting everybody know, like I said, that Department of Rehabilitation is here. We are ready to partner and continue to provide those services. So next slide, please. And then I just provided links to the Department of Rehabilitation. I saw some questions on the bottom of where I can get information on student services or flyers. We have all that great stuff at that website, dor.ca.gov. Most of our forms are in Spanish and most languages, I believe there, but for sure Spanish and English. And then I have the email there for the youth services in general questions at DOR. And then I just added a DOR COVID-19 response link. All of these links though can be found at the DOR main site, which is www.dor.ca.gov. So that's all I have today. I wish everybody well. Please stay safe. And I want to thank you again.
Hey, thank you, Elizabeth. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Chris Leroy, our Workability One Advisory Chair. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm here with my pal, Joanna Della Gatta, who's from Region 2. She's a co-manager there and does a bunch of things within the Ventura County SELPA. So we're going to kind of co-present about workability. I also want to thank Nick Waveren and Wes Roberson and Shauna Pacheco, my friends and workability team, is putting this stuff together. You know, certainly we're looking at workability from a broad view. If folks who don't intersect with us currently, and then we're going to try to spotlight Joanna's program and Region as sort of a example of how we are a very strong collaborative partner, and that'll be our message moving forward for today. Let's click. Okay, so here's the broad piece on workability. We're going to talk about work training, employment placement, independent living, post-secondary, training for students making transition for school work. That's what we do. That's our thing. And we want to cover that. We're just one of the sources. We're certainly not the only source. If you've seen this broad perspective from the presentation today, and the concepts of support from the national level, how it works down into our individual sites and programs and agencies in California, and then how we are, through transition, as a part of transition, providing an array of services for school-based learning, and what kind of support we can be for community-based models, how we're addressing distance learning in this COVID closure, how we collaborate with DOR and Regional Center and other agencies, and then what things are we starting to learn because of COVID. That's what we want to focus on in our half-hour gig here. Click. Oh, I start clicking my machine. Go ahead. Here's the mission, and I just wanted to focus on one key word. The mission of workability is to promote the involvement of key stakeholders, and these are the students, families, educators, employers, and other agencies in planning and implementing an array of services that culminate in successful young adults key word in this for today is us in collaboration with our stakeholders. We think is really, really important, and workability, because of its history and our footprint across the state. We're a really good partner moving forward with all the stakeholders involved. Click. Real fast facts from our GRC committee, and I know that Sue Sawyer said, you need to have a fast fact, so here we do. Just showing that as a program, we've been around for 30 plus years, and here's just some stats from the 2018-2019 year. In over 260 districts and schools statewide, 107,000 plus students served, 23,000 with work experiences. So we're part of the engine. We're sort of the transition engine that gets young people experience, trained, prepped, and then start moving out into those services and into the realm of employers, testing those waters, and then finding out what they do best and improving on those tools. So just want to kind of share the footprint of workability. Click.
And I think that's me, Chris.
And then Joanne goes from here, focusing kind of on her story within her region and her position.
Okay, thank you. We recently presented some of this information within our SELPA, so I'm just actually sharing what my workability specialist shared with agencies and teachers just a couple of weeks ago. So we mentioned the array of services for workability, and that's just the term we have for all the things we do underneath the workability grant. And very briefly, that includes career and vocational assessments as the very basis and employment planning. California Career Zone, I think we've already mentioned that earlier today, is one of the resources that we use when we do assessments. Students can create an account, and teachers can have an account on there as well. My workability specialist created links underneath these hot links here. So for those of you who have the PowerPoint, you should be able to click on it. I think when we're done, I missed the beginning of the presentation, but underneath those are Word documents for different resources that our workability specialist was happy to share. She also takes the students on the road for that career awareness and exploration piece using Career One Stop, where you can really look at a particular job that a student might be heading towards and look at how much money that job earns somebody, what kind of education you need, and then a basic worksheet about where all of the students can record that information on as they're working through their school year. And this is done with students who are ages 15 and over, usually students who are in high school who have that transition plan. Next slide. And in addition to those assessment services, we have employment-based services. So my workability specialist, our team practices job applications once they've done those job search, and we require 3 sample job applications just for practice. And my team sorts students into 3 different categories so that she and I can really see what their needs are and really target students' needs, since we serve a variety, students with a variety of abilities. Students with the highest needs would be those students who need more of the school-based employment, like maybe a job on campus. Maybe they want to work in the cafeteria, or they want to practice being a teacher's assistant or something in the office. Maybe they also need those skills just in the classroom before they can even go out and do some classroom-based, work-based learning within the classroom. Students with moderate needs, more of our mild moderate students, they might need that workability subsidized opportunity to get out to work. They can't really do that completely on their own, and those opportunities are shared with our agency partners. So the workability grant money in our area, and I think that the challenge is statewide, is, you know, we have a lot of students to serve, and it costs more to subsidize students every year as minimum wage goes up. So how do we spread and leverage our resources within our local area to provide subsidized employment? Sometimes it's using the workability grant money, and sometimes it's partnering with Department of Rehabilitation or the regional center or other agencies that might have some support in that area. And then the third category of students are students with low needs. That means that the workability specialist can just help the student with their workability application or employment application. Just check in with that student, maybe weekly, monthly, and see how those applications, interviews, and where they are in the process and how all that's going. And of course, some job coaching types of meetings as the student is in the employment and to keep job for job retention. Of course, we work on developing a portfolio for students, which includes resumes. So I think the link here for resumes isn't working properly, so don't try to click on that link, but any resume template that you guys have that your teachers might be using, there's so many out there. In addition, we do peer-reviewed mock interviews. So underneath the interview questions link, is a worksheet that has sample interview questions, the basic ones that students would be asked, that we were all asked when we applied for our jobs. And the teacher really goes through, the workability specialist or the teacher in a small group or in a classroom, in a classroom lesson would go through those interview questions with the students one at a time where they write the answers down. Next time the teacher or the workability specialist come back, they go through those interview questions with their peers and their teachers as their interview panel. So they can have those questions and the answers in front of them, and they're going to practice answering those questions. The panelists all have that feedback rubric, which is underneath the link as well, and rating students on handshake, how their posture was, how their appearance was, Chris. And how do we appear during that interview? So the student will get multiple peer review feedback from prior to ever going into a real interview. And then, you know, the next week we come back and we talk about what was the feedback, what would we do differently next time? Next slide. And then as the subsidized employment, like I said, we partner with not only with our agencies, but with our local businesses. So we call them business partners or local business partners, and the placements must be in competitive integrated employment. So we talk about those CIE opportunities where students are integrated with non-disabled peers and they are earning at least minimum wage. And like we said, the grant money coming from the workability grant is used to pay the students, and the school district becomes the employer of record. And so there's usually an employment packet that needs to be filled out. So if a student's getting a subsidized employment through the district, they will be able to get their paycheck. The business partner is always covered with a certificate of liability, insurance liability, so that they can see that as like a volunteer opportunity without being burdened by what the possible liability would be, and giving students that real opportunity for training in that place of work. Students in workability job tryouts like this are to do the same jobs as other people who are employed at that location. And of course, then it makes students better prepared to enter the job market, either to work at that location, unsubsidized, hopefully would be the goal, following a subsidized placement, or at another job, either in the same area or just as a resume builder for some of those workplace skills that are needed. Next slide.
Oh, for the unsubsidized, it's not so dissimilar from subsidized as that workability is not being the payer in that process. Right. But we're moving students closer to a longer term experience where the investment is with the employer. So usually it's students who have worked for a while, or the business wants to do something and pay for it, or we use Department of Rehabilitation possibly, or we try to work out a more extended work experience. That's sort of the realm within the unsubsidized piece. But whether it's a rural experience or an urban experience, at the heart of it is if we keep really good communication with the employer, with with families, with student, we kind of finesse any questions that they have moving into this a little bit more uncharted territory. So unsubsidized is sort of the next phase for our students. Next. This goes on forever. Wes had a million questions. How does placement align with workability and secondary transition goals on IEP? This has always been a little bit controversial, but it works best if you're going to talk about workability in your IEP to put it more in the present levels or in the notes of what the service is, more than a projected goal, because it's still money that's projected into the next year. It'd be better just explaining what you're doing in the here and now. What role have LPAs in subsidized CIE placements? Well, it's phenomenal. The LPA process, especially with workability being at the hub of that, we're working with all our partners and we're building a better work base for our population. And I think it's having a tremendous impact because now it's a conversation that we all are having and it's creating more opportunities for our kids. Next.
And to go along to extend that conversation about collaboration with the local partnership agreement, first we partner with families, with parents. And in our program, permission slips are sent home at the beginning of the year. So we get parent contact information. We start involving the family right away. Emails and phone calls back and forth with families. My workability specialist provides input for the IEP meeting and sometimes goes to the IEP meeting if she is able to. And then the workability part of what we do is also follow up with students a year after they have left. So once they have graduated or reached maximum age of 22, then we follow up and see, you know, are you employed? Are you going to college? What is your living situation? And that collaboration, like we were saying with the local partnership, is also embedded in the classroom and at the school. So the workability specialist works with case managers in supporting the students. So it can look like a lot of different things. And one way is that the workability specialist goes into the classroom and teaches a whole class, like the mock interview and peer ratings for mock interviews. So that's kind of a whole class, SDC classroom type of presentation. The workability specialist also keeps a log of the types of services and meetings that she has with students and shares that with the case manager. And most recently in the last year is supporting the recording of those new transition work-based and classroom-based experience indicators that we have in our IEP system. And of course has input and sometimes is providing the evidence that transition goals have been met. And like we've been alluding to during this entire presentation, collaborating with other agencies regarding transition, DOR, the community colleges, the regional center. And then next slide. And as far as pulling the scope out now from the school, in our SELPA, I work at the SELPA level, and we are the third largest multi-district SELPA, so we serve over 19,000 special education students. And just to give you an idea, within our SELPA, we have 3 workability programs or projects, 2 that are single district, and then the SELPA project, which I oversee, covers the rest of the school districts and the NPSs and the county programs within our SELPA. But everything that I'm about to talk about here, I feel like could be done on many different scales. So even though we're large, that these activities could be modified and work in any area, but this is specifically what we do. So 4 times a year, our Interagency Transition Coordinating Council meets, and that is a group made up of school district representatives and agency representatives. And some of your, and in some of your areas, you might also be calling your local partnership team or your local partnership agreement group. And that also includes our Family Resource Center. when we come together, we share current activities and what is going on in each of our agencies and school districts. At every meeting, we have an in-depth presentation by either one of the school programs or by one of the agency programs. And then at the end of every school year, the SELPA hosts the final meeting alongside with the employment collaborative from the regional center, so that more school representatives can attend the employment collaborative, which they may or may not be able to normally attend, and that we can get more DOR and service coordinators and agency representatives at our what we call ITSE meeting. And that was set up for me before I was in this position, and continues though to be the leading collaboration in our SELPA for students who are getting to work. We also have a transition network team that meets 3 times a year, and this is made up of and open to all secondary and post-secondary teachers. We usually ask that at least one representative from the school or district attends those meetings and takes that information back to like their department meetings at their schools. So it's only 3 times a year, and the event is free. All these events are free, by the way. And this is one way that I use a little piece of the workability grant money that we receive in our area. So minimally just to pay for the room that it takes for us to meet in. And also for that transition network team, in order to entice the teachers to come, we also provide a little bit of food. So it's a really nice collaboration and networking time that we have. And in our 3 meetings in a year, we hold 1 mini transition fair. And that would be the agencies that attend are the ones that we would be referring out from our IEPs. So the DOR, the regional center, the colleges, the university. And then the other 2 meetings are an education panel and an employment panel. So our last meeting this year was only a couple of weeks ago. And of course it was during our school closure, and we were able to hold our employment panel just like this on a Zoom meeting, where the regional center, the Department of Rehabilitation, and the workability specialist shared not only what they do normally, but their updates for distance learning. And it was really cool to hear that we're all doing what we can to serve our students in these unique and unprecedented times. Next slide. I'm almost there. And of course, twice a year, we hold a transition fair in our area. So that's 40 local agencies. We have breakout sessions for parents, students. We usually have about 400 to 500 attendees. And it's for students, families, and educators. We're looking towards the fall to try to figure out a way how we might be able to hold our transition fair with all of this offered virtually. So we're thinking about different ways that maybe we can have agencies record themselves in a little blurb, maybe have office hours, maybe have those breakout sessions available via Zoom at specific times. So our steering committee is working on those ideas. And if you guys have any thoughts, please send them my way. And next slide. In our area, we've had, during the COVID closure, we've had those extra subcommittee meetings. So we've needed extra meetings so that we can talk about distance learning within our workability region, or within our workability statewide. Chris has organized that we had a region manager meeting that wasn't otherwise planned, so we can address COVID issues. We're holding our advisory meetings virtually. And within our region, which is Region 2, and I know that my co-manager is on this webinar. Hi, Jennifer. So in place of our spring training, we were supposed to have a big conference that will be holding mini virtual trainings about end of year reporting and distance learning. Next slide. Chris?
Okay, we're going to the last stages here. There was a couple other questions that had come up to us. What are the best practices for work-based learning in the classroom? And we're just saying overall, and I thank you, Joanna, for just sort of spotlighting when your program does. And I think it does all these things. They use proven curriculum, they develop a portfolio, they focus both on soft skills and hard skills, and maintain great connection to their employers and partners. And that's what's sort of building this network, stronger and stronger network for our students. So a good plan always just is being very being open and engaging. Next. Let's focus on workability. The last few slides. Workability is a local resource. We can continue to be this excellent resource. We're disseminating ideas and strategies through our Workability Central site. I posted somewhere that's in there to our Padlet from SRT that has information also. But here's some ideas that we've been posting to each other. What are folks doing in workability out there? Some folks are sending out their video to the high school tour to the 8th graders, so they're just prepping their minds for the next stage. Before the pandemic, some of these folks had already built these folders and these files, and so once people got into the Google Classroom setting, they're able to access things that maybe we hadn't planned on that, but now we're really using it. Similarly with screencasting, a lot of resources that we have are now finding new ways to disseminate. Click. And here's some of the zillions of things that you'll be able to find on the palette and other things that we'll get out to the field. Next. Workability is obviously a great super connected resource. So if you're not engaged, I was reading the chat and I saw this wonderful thing. People who were asking how they could become transition specialists or be working with workability. And that's exactly what we're hoping you would feel while we were presenting. So if you haven't engaged with workability or looked how to become connected to DR or regional center, consider what the key strengths are about workability. Because for over 30 years, we've developed strong long-term community connections for students, families, businesses, and support agencies. We have this long-standing infrastructure of regions that support each other, great committees that support the field, and that's going to stay. Some of the things that we saw before the COVID is going to stay after the COVID, right? And then workability also has led the way establishing local partnerships agreements. We've really made it a part of our business. And so as we're working with our DR partners and regional center partners and all our business friends, we're creating a more efficient, coordinated service for the folks we serve. Click. If you don't have workability or DOR in your area, if you're not part of a local plan agreement, I would still reach out to the closest DR or the closest workability person that you can find and ask about the LPA and see if you can join. Certainly with family resource centers too. There are ways to get connected into that model, and so information can be disseminated to you. Also, if you reach out to DR, and Joyce had mentioned this earlier, they may get you connected to their student services model because they're looking to serve kids, and we might be a good liaison from the schools to help set that up. There's a wealth of transition resources. Linda shared about WinTAC and NTAC. I mean, tremendous things. So you want to be able to just start reaching out, and you can start connecting those dots for your students, even if you don't have a program yet. It doesn't mean that you won't get connected, but start connecting the dots. Next.
And Chris, I just want to add at the bottom of the previous slide is a link to a Padlet of resources that one of our region managers, SRT, has created. So if you don't have workability in your area, you can always go to this Padlet and just start pulling resources from there to provide support to your students.
Yeah, that almost crawled off the bottom of the screen there, but it is,
okay.
That Padlet's just great. I think this is our last thoughts here. I just want to talk a little bit about workability in the COVID era. Through the COVID impact, workability has remained calm and flexible in responding to the needs of the field. CD has been tremendously flexible in how we can move our grants and shift things around to make sure that we get the coverage that we need, not putting extra pressure on a difficult time. We've developed varied plans for continuing to prepare students for economic employment opportunities through our distance learning instruction. And we're learning more about that every day. And what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from people throughout the state is that the advantage is that we've stayed connected and strengthened communications with CDE. We've partnered with agencies. And so we're going to be planning together and working together much more closely as we moved into this phased return back into the job world. Last slide. And through the COVID situation, Workability has used their cumulative historical knowledge. We've been around for 30+ years to support transition services. However, because of this impact, this is what I see. We're doing a great job of collecting, synthesizing, and distributing a wealth of this national best practices out to the field. There's some things that have sat dormant that people haven't used. Well, now we're starting to use it. That's great. We've developed and continue to assess effective distance learning formats that will continue into the post-COVID era. I think a lot of our Google exchanges and classrooms and Hangouts are going to continue even when we're all back into our settings. But most important, and it's from the bottom of our heart, all the people on this panel, I know they believe this to be true, that in this very difficult time, that we've deepened our relationships. We've deepened our relationship with students, with families through this distance learning. And so every phone call, every virtual classroom meeting, and individual connection, we're building a stronger foundation that will support all our stakeholders as we move forward together. So we're stronger than all of this, and I really look forward to all of our collaboration moving forward. I thank you, Joanna, for giving us that spotlight, and thank you, Sue and the team for giving us part of the story.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the presenters today. Again, so much worthwhile, informative information. We posted the survey link in the chat. We will also send it out with the email following this presentation. So thank you for attending. And again, happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you for all you're doing out in the field. And we hope you found this webinar number 3 as informative as the first. We hope to see you next Wednesday at 3. Thank you so much.